Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the Minister of Justice and Public Safety, the Attorney General, Judy Manning. Good morning, Minister Manning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, obviously, the story that has got a lot of attention the last couple of days is your tenure as a review commissioner at the Workers' Compensation Board. You say there's been some inaccurate information. If it's okay with you, we can just stick to where the inaccuracies are as opposed to some of the media outlet specifics, because I'll let you deal with them on a one-to-one basis. So where are people mischaracterizing your tenure as a review commissioner?
Of course. I believe that it's not so much that there's an inaccuracy, there's an omission. And the omission is in the fact that I followed the protocol that was prescribed to me as a part-time review commissioner. And that protocol included submitting my draft decisions to the review commissioner's, to the chief review commissioner's assistant. And then the chief review commissioner would review the decision. It would potentially be forwarded to the in-house lawyer, and then it would come back to me with suggested revisions. As I've indicated, I had my first hearing on June 12th, and I submitted I have finalized my draft of the above referenced decision. I sent that by email on August 9th, 2014, to the assistant, to the chief, as well as to the in-house counsel. And I've provided a copy of that email because, of course, I certainly don't assume for 1 minute that the people of Newfoundland and Labrador should trust me at my word based on how I've faced a lot of criticism over the past month. So I intend to earn that respect. But in the meantime, I've provided that email. I've provided the indication that there is, in fact, an attachment. I've also provided to you and to your studio the response that I received 2 days later from the assistant, and indicating the process as I've described it. I have never received any written commentary on that decision, and certainly that was the case at the time that I resigned my position. That decision was meant to serve as a template for my future decisions, and at this time, of course, it hasn't been filed because it's essentially been out of my hands since August 9th, 2014.
So when you submit your first draft for review to create this template for the remaining 18 cases, that's one thing. But then when no review or no response comes back from the chief review commissioner, then you still make the decision to walk away from your post. And there's a few issues inside that which people are taking exception to. One, why not stay until all 19 have been dealt with and the response comes from the chief review commissioner so you can see through what you were charged to do in the first place?
Yes, that's a very good point, Patty, and I would refer to the regulations. The regulations of the Act actually indicate that upon the cessation or the ending of your term as a review commissioner, it is possible that with the approval of the chief review commissioner, you would carry out and complete any duties or responsibilities and continue to exercise any powers that you may have had if you had not ceased to be a review commissioner in relation to a specific proceeding in which you'd participated. So in this case, of course, come toward the end of September, and I should note here, I mean, I had certainly the chief review commissioner, who works very hard in her capacity there. She had indicated to me that she had read my decision and she would be getting back to me. So I'm satisfied certainly that she read my decision, and again, she's responsible for reviewing the decisions of all of these part-time commissioners. But getting back to your point, so come the end of September, and when I'm in discussions with respect to potentially joining the cabinet table, I resigned my position with the review as a review commissioner, and I was prepared to actually write the remaining outstanding decisions. And as a matter of fact, after my appointment as cabinet minister, I did submit another decision because it had been my intention to write these decisions or to finalize these decisions following my review of my initial decision. The chief review commissioner also has within her discretion the opportunity, of course, to decide whether or not I do carry out those duties and responsibilities. The chief and I had some discussions. She was apprehensive that there might be an apprehension of bias or a perception of bias if I, as Attorney General, was authoring these decisions that potentially potentially an applicant could take those to judicial review. And so she recommended, and I'm certainly satisfied with her decision and certainly within her discretion, that I not, in fact, author any of these decisions. And so that's where, and that was at the time, I recommended to her, okay, well, in basically for compensation for, preparing for these and conducting the hearings and the records existing as they are, I will take 1/3 of the remuneration. And she was very receptive to that, and that's what takes us to where we are today.
Part of the controversy is, there's one thing, we'll get to what people are considering a contradiction in the ability for maximum earnings and type of stuff, but help me understand the timeline here. So you resigned from your post, and this is how it's being characterized. You resigned from your post with no knowledge of being appointed by the Premier to your ministerial portfolio, and 5 days later that happened. Is that how this works out? Is that the actual timeline?
No, absolutely. I have never said that I resigned from my post with no knowledge. I've indicated I was having discussions with the Premier regarding this potential opportunity. It had not yet been confirmed that I would be actually offered to join Cabinet, but there were some discussions. At that time, I resigned my post as Review Commissioner. I would know, Patty, I'm a very honest person. You may or may not like me, but I'm a very honest person, and I noted yesterday, I put out a statement yesterday to try to clarify this, because it did come as some surprise to me that this was actually, that this was becoming basically such an issue purportedly about my professional integrity. So I put out a statement yesterday, and the last sentence of that statement said, financial considerations did not play into that decision whatsoever. If you read the paragraph, if you read that in context, that is referring to those 19 decisions, the 19 hearings that I actually conducted. With respect to my overall view of how I would continue, or whether I would continue as a Review Commissioner, it didn't make sense for me, trying to run my own business as a sole practitioner, to continue as a part-time Review Commissioner.
So why take the job in the first place?
Well, at the time that I took the position, I guess I was probably somewhat naive as to the amount of work and the amount of time that actually goes into preparing for these hearings, having the hearings, and writing the decisions. And so, as you know, in private practice, I was based on the hourly rate model. That's how I conducted my business. And it didn't make sense for me. It just wasn't feasible for me to continue on my own as a lawyer and continue in that capacity. But I would have never, ever shirked my responsibilities with those 19 hearings. I have great empathy for the applicants working through the workplace compensation system in this province.
Did you view the role as a Review Commissioner as a political stepping stone?
I certainly wouldn't characterize it that way. I would say that it was in line with when I worked particularly in Toronto. My practice was insurance defense, and I certainly did work with the statutory accident benefits, and so from the medical legal perspective, I mean, this evaluating these the file documentation and conducting these hearings was in line with that kind of work. So it was of great professional interest to me.
Judy, can we talk about how this conversation initially began with Premier Davis about an opportunity potentially to be named to the Cabinet, albeit as an unelected minister? Just some brief answers to get the conversation going here. So the Premier approached you first.
Yes.
And then upon understanding there may be an opportunity, one of the controversial pieces of your appointment has been whether or not you would run in the first available by-election, or to stand, as you said, as you've made clear very many times, to run the general election and or by-election if Mr. Collins stepped down to stay in Placentia St. Mary's. Was that one of the terms that you brought to the table, that without that you would not get the appointment? How did that work?
I certainly advised Premier Davis that my interest was in Placentia St. Mary's, and at the first opportunity I'd be happy to run in Placentia St. Mary's. And
so that issue was of no controversy. You put it forward, the Premier accepted your terms, and off you go.
I don't know if characterizing it as putting forward terms and accepting would be appropriate. I mean, I advised the Premier, and subsequently I was asked to join Cabinet, so mean, I guess it's all a matter of semantics, really.
When it comes to the rate of pay and the ability to maximize your earning opportunities in the private sector with a billable hour at whatever rate we're charging compared to the review commissioner's rates, inside that, when you've made comment about profit and or rate of pay and accepting of remuneration that would be less than a full completed case of $750, all those comments have really come back to, in with lack of a better phrase, come back to bite you. Do you understand how people are reviewing and absorbing your conversation about money? When they see it as a decision-making process that had to do with money as opposed to execution of or discharging of your duties and then accepting a position in the cabinet, it's all one thing. But many people are focusing on the money. They see clear contradictions. Is there anything that you haven't put forward to either diminish that or to explain it? Because for many, they're hanging their hat on that this is about money and nothing but, and it's about money based on political entitlement or negotiations or connections, all the things you've heard. Do you want to speak to that directly, please?
Again, certainly the financial considerations have nothing to do with how those ultimate 19 cases were to be disposed of, and I'm sure Chief Review Commissioner Hickey will verify the fact that certainly I had email correspondence after I resigned my position and also after I was appointed as a cabinet minister, and I was certainly open to completing those decisions, and I respect Chief Review Commissioner Hickey's decision in that regard. With respect to my practice as a sole practitioner, I started that practice in April, and as a sole practitioner, of course, I'm responsible for supporting myself, and I had to obviously make the choices that would work best for me from an economic perspective. I mean, I'm actually, in my 10th year of call to the bar, and certainly as my career has evolved, I've always been, I've always been happy to move on to the next available opportunity that allows me to develop professionally in the best manner. In this case, with respect to the remuneration component of cabinet minister, as you know, it's $54,000 and change. This is not a financially motivated decision, obviously. This is a decision that allows me to serve the public in a capacity that's unparalleled, and I'm happy about that.
One of the things that the PC party has tried to do to change the tune and or the so-called narrative politically is to talk about how they're listening, and they're going to react to the public and the public needs and wants based on polls and or what they hear directly around programs like this. NTV and MQO has done a poll, and one of the specific questions was surrounding your appointment and your unwillingness to run in the first available by-election. It's quite clear that the public are, one, not too thrilled with the appointment of an unelected person, albeit those numbers aren't really extraordinary or severe, but they are severe when it comes down to your willingness to run in the by-election, whether it be in Trinity Bay, Vert, CBS, or Humphreys, wherever the case may be. If and when the PCs are going to listen, isn't this not a key opportunity to say and to demonstrate that you're listening as opposed to tell us you're listening and go ahead and do the right thing? And where's the downside of running somewhere else and then taking a shot in Placentia St. Mary's in the general?
Well, it's interesting in terms of the precedents for unelected ministers. Of course, we have many across the country, and certainly in our own province. So I recognize that there may be some discourse with respect to being an unelected minister. But that being said, I actually had the opportunity to be in Placentia last night at the Chamber of Commerce, and it's interesting. I recognize that I haven't seen the poll that you're speaking of, by the way, but I recognize that there are various opinions being advanced on this front. But certainly, I was fortunate to encounter many potential constituents last night in Placentia who vehemently agreed with my position, which is we're going to the election in less than a year for certain. It could be a matter of months, who knows? And I'm going to run then, and I'm not going to try to impose myself on another district in the interim and then leave that district to run Placentia St. Mary's. And so I've gotten a lot of support in my district of Placentia St. Mary's regarding that decision.
Let's move on to some other issues that are inside your portfolio. There was a decision made with legal aid and the accused murderer Trevor Pardy not going to accept a legal aid and legal aid rates, and he's going to be granted an opportunity to pay top dollar to a notable defense attorney. In my opinion, really diminishes the importance of legal aid and opens up Pandora's box for people at every turn for the so-called serious crime to go down the road of a more expensive cost to the taxpayer for representation. Number one, is legal aid up to the task of representing their clients in these serious cases? And number two, do you agree with the decision made by the justice?
I have great faith in our legal aid lawyers. As you know, our legal aid lawyers have the opportunity to engage in trials probably more often than most, if not all, of our private practice lawyers. So I have great faith in the abilities of legal aid. With respect to the decision, I certainly I note that there are strong dissenting opinions with that decision from a couple of our justices, and within the department, of course, we're looking at that decision. We're considering the practical utility of pursuing an appeal of that decision. But in the interim, of course, we do have the recommendations from the Royal Report, which deals with the issue of the legal aid tariffs, and we're considering that recommendation very seriously. This may be something that we can respond to legislatively, as opposed to having to pursue an appeal of that decision at the Supreme Court of Canada. But we haven't ruled that out yet either.
There are another couple of issues. One would have a direct relation or potentially an indirect relation to your portfolio, but you'd have some working knowledge of this given your choices of theses when you're working towards your masters. And that's the conversation broached by Minister Derek Daly in China about Gull Island. You, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, you wrote and investigated the opportunity for the transmission of power from Labrador in through Quebec, through the rest of Canada, into the US, with all sorts of different overviews and potentials and angles. Can you describe what you understand in that potential for the transmission of power in the federal government's oversight and authority?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to correct this issue. Certainly my professor, my supervising professor, has written to one of the media outlets to correct this as well. There is a bibliography online which was part of my Law 703 class when I was attending at the University of Calgary. It was an exercise in terms of preparing an annotated bibliography. I considered that topic for my major paper. My major paper actually deals with subsurface trespass in the hydraulic fracturing context. So the annotated bibliography that I've heard quoted in the media several times, that was not the subject of my major. That is not the subject of my major paper. With respect to Minister Daly's comments, I believe that those inquiries are perhaps best directed to him.
Fair enough. When it comes down to the execution of your job as the minister now, one of the controversies came with the rebranding of the office from Justice to Justice Now in Public Safety. Can you describe what the conversations were between yourself and the Premier as to the focus of public safety, what that means specifically?
Obviously, I'm not going to disclose or to breach any cabinet privilege here, or any privilege that.
But just 1 second, isn't that a matter of public concern with the rebranding, which was obviously controversial, wasn't well received? I don't need to have the word for word or verbatim conversation with the Premier, but can you describe for the electorate what public safety means and the focus of that new facet of the department?
Yes, certainly as a government under the leadership of Premier Davis, we are dedicated to responding to the changing nature of crime that we're seeing here in this province. And we have certainly heard from the general public that there is an increased concern about the types of issues that we're facing here in our jurisdiction. And so with a view to reassuring the public and putting an increased focus on addressing these issues, we wanted to rebrand the department. Now, subsequently, as you're well aware, there were concerns raised with respect to the lack of the word justice in the department name, and I'm happy to say that we've responded to those inquiries, and we're happy to now operate as the Department of Justice and Public Safety. I trust that is reassuring to the public regarding our dedication to certainly preserving the rights and freedoms and upholding the rights and freedoms of all of us as Canadians, but as well making sure that there is an emphasis on responding to the changing nature of the crime, the crime activity that we're seeing in our jurisdiction.
It's obviously a very difficult road to be involved in provincial politics in general terms, and given how your appointment came about, all the controversy that came from it, people are now, and you hear it as much as I do, they'll refer to your ability to handle the heat, the thickness of skin, the frustration with how you characterize character assassination and or personal assault when we should be talking policy. Is that how you feel, and do you think you can endure this kind of heat and stick to it? Many people are already predicting your resignation prior to Christmas in the spring and in June or the next fall. Do you have what it takes to stick to it, because the heat is not going to be turned down, as I imagine you understand?
I certainly hope nobody out there is silly enough to put money on my resignation, because I can assure you that won't be happening. I'm really happy to be in this role under Premier Davis's leadership. It's already been very gratifying. I have a tremendous team here within our department, and great support, great expertise, and certainly I'm dedicated to this role at this time in my life, and I look forward to serving the people in this capacity.
If you go as many as 2 terms of the House of Assembly without having to sit and face opposition questions to be captured and answered, how can the electorate be assured that you are not only available to the media, which is, the scrum issue is one thing or another, but if people continue to hold that against you so far as your willingness to run, your credibility and or your professionalism, how are you going to tackle that one? Because that's going to be far more tricky than justifying a tag of public safety or those types of issues. When they continue to attack your credibility, how do you respond?
Well, first of all, I would note that I'm not about to engage in hypotheticals as to how long I may be sitting as an unelected minister. I would note that Minister King and the Premier will be responding within the House to questions directed to my department, and certainly I will be attending each session, sitting in the gallery, and then, of course, I will be making myself available to the media. With respect to the public's perception of me, I'm obviously very eager to get further into my files here at the Department of Justice and Public Safety. We have some very exciting announcements which will be forthcoming from our end, and I think that as time proceeds and as people get to see me responding to the issues of the actual portfolio as opposed to, these personal issues, I think that I'll be able to garner the faith of the electorate, not just in Placentia St. Mary's, but certainly all across this province, and I'm looking forward to serving in that role.
I appreciate your time this morning, Miss Manning. Stay in touch at your convenience.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.